Welcome back, Sleep Nation, to Sleep Takeout, the podcast where we take complicated sleep science and turn it into practical strategies that you can use in everyday life. I'm Daniel, and I'm a psychologist specializing in sleep psychology.
And I'm Michelle, and I'm a physician specializing in sleep and pulmonary medicine. And today we're going to talk about a unique travel challenge. When you cross time zones while you're in northern destinations and the sun stays out really late, so think about Canada, think about Alaska, and that you may be in a place where the sun barely sets at all, and how that affects sleep.
Oh, yeah. Like maybe you're in these northern kind of, latitudes, and it could be, Iceland, could be Scandinavia, or could be somewhere else known for its long summer days. And you look out the window and it's 10:30 at night and it still looks like it's late afternoon. And it can be beautiful and energizing and also kind of a little disorienting. I kind of had this experience this past summer when just got back from a trip in Alaska, and I was like, oh my gosh, my body tells me I'm exhausted, but my brain is telling me that it's so bright outside right now and I can still actually see the sun, that it is not sleepy time, but I feel like the sleepiness is approaching.
So your brain tells you, oh, the day is still going and I should stay awake, but it's not the right time. And at some point, you have to sleep. When that extended daylight is also combined, we live in Florida. So when you're combining the time zone change and the change in the light, it can make falling asleep and staying asleep really difficult. It's real important, as we've talked about before, that you want to adjust it to the time zone. But what if it doesn't feel like that?
Yes, great question. So this is why today we're going to talk about how to enjoy these long, beautiful, summertime days for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere without allowing the time change and the extended daylight to completely derail your sleep. So, and as always, all of our Sleep Takeout followers, this episode is for general education and is not individualized, medical or psychological advice. We always want you to speak with your physician or sleep psychologist before using, anything like melatonin, sleep medications, or anything like that, or even making a change that could affect a medical condition. Before we do all that, let's start with one of the most important ideas right now in sleep science. And this is really that your brain does not tell time by looking at the clock. So your brain has this internal thing called the circadian rhythm, and this system helps you regulate when you feel alert and when you become sleepy and when certain hormones are released and even when your body expects meals. And one of the strongest signals used by this internal clock is light.
So bright light generally tells your brain it's daytime, be up, be alert, do everything, right? And darkness is going to tell the brain things are ending, wind down, try and get prepared for sleep. And when you travel across time zones and your hours that you've been awake, remember that homeostatic mechanism, you're getting tired, you're getting sleepy, but then you get all these clues that it's actually time to stay awake and stay energized because you have all this light. But really, internally, your body is still just made a very rapid shift out to the other side, and you want to go to sleep. And it's a really hard thing. The clock on your phone changes immediately. We're not even having to set that in the middle of an airplane trip. If you were in the 80s and 90s, that's what you had to do. They would kind of announce what time zone that you were in, and you would just take out your watch and rechange the clock. It's a temporary mismatch, and it's commonly what we call a jet lag. It's definitely easier for some people to deal with jet lag, and there's a lot of tricks to that. We may have talked about that, Dan, about how to work with the jet lag. But in general, your body is still your body. Treat it like that small child that you need to kind of give it the heads up that this is happening, because this is a thing. Even if 5-10 years ago it didn't bother you, it may start bothering you, and you don't want it to be unexpected.
Oh, yeah. And too, I think it's important to keep this in context that, jet lag and even the experience this is still a relatively new phenomena for our bodies to experience. Our biology is not primed to really understand the entire experience of what jet lag is. Because you think about it, travel like this has really only been around since, since airplane travel. There has been railroad travel before that, which is when the time zones, at least in the States, started to show up. But even that was at a scale or a pace that wasn't as accelerated as, oh, I just hopped off a flight and now I'm like several hours ahead or behind from where I used to be. So what's really kind of important is you might feel sleepy during the local daytime. You might feel wide awake at bedtime. You might feel hungry at unusual hours. You might feel mentally foggy, could be irritable, or simply quite, not like yourself. And when you add extremely long periods of daylight into that travel, your brain might need, some additional wakefulness or might receive some additional wakefulness signals precisely when you're trying to settle down. So fortunately, we've got some helpful tips for all of our listeners today on how to handle some of this jet lag combined with being exposed to extended kind of daytime light. So tip number one for all our listeners here, we're going to start off with start living on your destination time. Michelle, what does that mean?
All right. So once you begin your trip, you gradually want to try and shift your behavior toward the time at your destination. All right. So we're going to use Dan's example here that you're in Florida and you get on an airplane and you get to your destination. So you flew in the daytime, you get there, and it's starting to be evening and night. Okay. But you have just traveled a whole bunch of time zones, and all of a sudden now you're really kind of getting tired. You're ready to go to sleep, but it's kind of the afternoon over there. So you want to set your watch and your phone to your destination time immediately. Many times that happens kind of automatically. And when you time your meals, when you time your caffeine and your naps, and you want to set to that new local level. So what that means is if you are arriving and it is their natural bedtime, but as we just talked about, it's still bright light, you want to acclimate your body to getting that darkness. So maybe would be sunglasses. Maybe it would be getting indoors and turning the lights a little bit more dim. But it's definitely not, just start your day like you've been teleported from, one place to another place. So you want to eat at the local times, even if your appetite feels confused. So maybe you're not eating a full meal, but generally you also want to eat pretty healthy. So eat natural foods, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, and you kind of go from there. For every 3 hours, it's going to take a day for you to acclimate in general.
Yeah. Well, and so let's use kind of the example that I just kind of got back from. So this was, traveling from Florida, which is on, US kind of East Coast time and we're on daylight savings time right now on the East Coast. And where I was going was Anchorage, Alaska, and they're actually 4 hours behind. However, they also have extended amounts of daylight right now. So I want to say it was roughly around like almost 20 hours of solid like sun a rise in the sky. That doesn't include like, the twilight kind of zones where it really never got dark entirely. And so what's really crazy about that is when you get there, you want to adjust to the local time as much as possible. And so really, I think what's important about this too, and Michelle, I know you mentioned, sunglasses. Also want to make a big plug for our sleep takeout, sleep eyewear that we've got too, the eye mask that's available, that's available for all of our listeners to to purchase there. Because sometimes, especially when you go into a northern latitude where there's extended daytime and extended daylight during the daytime, you might need an artificial source to make it darker for you. But the key to that is you want to try to remain awake until a reasonable local bedtime rather than going to sleep several hours early. So, of course, with this kind of suggestion, safety first. If you're dangerously sleepy, we don't want you to drive or force yourself to remain active. But whenever possible, we want you to gently move towards the local schedule as much as you can, because this gives your brain a clear and more consistent kind of timing cues. So All right. So that was tip number one. Tip number two, think about the direction you travel. What does that mean, Michelle?
All right, I love talking about this because it is a difference whether you're traveling from east to west and losing hours or from west to east and maybe I said that backwards. When you're traveling east and traveling to the west, you create very different challenges, and you need to fall asleep and wake up earlier than your body expects you to. So for many people, this is the more difficult one. So you all of a sudden like teleported forward, right? Morning light at the appropriate time can help you shift your body clock earlier. And in the evening, reducing that bright light can support that adjustment. Remember, we have to use our conscious mind to get the light to where our body naturally feels it, even though it will feel a little bit off.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to what you're saying, Michelle, is that, east travel, is that west travel. The real kind of caveat on all this is you can go far enough west and then it becomes east again, and you can go far enough east and it becomes west again. So really, and I know a lot of our listeners, change several time zones and several continents actually as well. So this is where we really, that one of the takeaway messages is we really want you to pay attention to the local time of where you're going. And that's really where you want to start adjusting to. So, when you travel west, you generally need to remain awake. This is in the States. When you're traveling west, you generally need to remain awake a little bit later than your body expects. Afternoon or eve or early evening light can help you to stay alert and gradually move your internal clock later. And the exact timing of that light can become complicated because, maybe you're crossing many time zones. But for most travelers, the practical message is simple. Use the daylight during the local daytime and deliberately create darkness during the local nighttime. Now, again, the caveat on this, like I was kind of saying, with my experience earlier this summer was the higher in the latitudes that you go, the more there is extended daylight during the daytime, regardless of the time zone piece. And I want to say one of the people I was talking to when I was in Alaska earlier this summer was they were saying something about, for every, roughly like, I want to say like 10 or 15 miles that you travel north, like the latitude, every time you change that latitude, more daylight starts to show up again. And so it's a really interesting phenomenon of even if, you took a 10-mile trip to a town north of you, that town north of you might actually have another additional like 5 to 10 minutes more of daylight. So that's another piece of where you're kind of adjusting to it from that perspective. So, okay. All right. And tip number 3 is really to create your own sunset. Now, this might be the most important strategy when visiting a place where the sun remains visible late into the evening. You might need to manufacture darkness, and you might need to use that sleep takeout eye mask to do that. So about 1 to 2 hours before you intend for your bedtime to happen, we want you to really begin reducing the amount of light that's reaching your eyes. That might be closing the curtain. It might be lowering the lights inside your room. It might be turning off unnecessary overhead lighting, using smaller lights when possible, reducing the brightness of your phone, tablet, television, all sorts of things like that.
So I actually think that it's harder to have more darkness than light. So we've been talking about the summer periods in these times, but really it's a lot harder for bodies to adjust to the darkness. And just like you were talking about, Dan, the things that you do to decrease your light, those are the things that you're going to have to do on the opposite spectrum when it's dark a lot longer. We're not in that dark period in North America here, but it's important that you can navigate your world and try and get the right types of light. So it's not just about blue lights and screens. It's about the appropriate timing of it and also like how much brightness do you really want. I was going to make another point about when you are traveling west and you're going to be staying up later, that there are ways to appropriately nap so they don't disrupt your sleep, because you are going to want to take these short rest periods, not get through a full sleep cycle. What does that mean? It depends on the person. But in general, if you feel like you're not sleepy, just take one of these little rest periods. Maybe do some breathing exercises, maybe do a mindful meditation. We have a couple that were kind of meant for sleep on the airplane. You can develop your own, a little rest period, reread a book, something that's kind of a quiet but not sleepy, tired but not sleepy type of activity, because you're anticipating later that day, you are actually going to be more tired. So think about, on New Year's Eve, you might do the same thing because you're going to be staying up later than you normally do. So
Mhm.
even the natural sunlight, coming from the hotel window can be a powerful alerting signal. So if you know that that's happening, you want to protect your environment. If
Mhm.
you know that you have to get up for that airplane trip and you have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, my son's going to be getting on an airplane trip. He's leaving Tampa at 5 something in the morning and traveling west. So his idea was, oh, just stay up all night. Not ideal, okay? You wanna get that 2 or 3 hours before, and then you wanna use that nap period on the airplane, because you're gonna be on the airplane traveling west in literally, airplane jail that you could easily relax rather than just play the games, watch the movie, and then that can help it so that you don't feel like you just have to crash when you get out west.
Yeah. In fact, Michelle, this makes me think we should have a sleep takeout, like visiting the northern latitudes experience and doing it both times of the year, right? Like, when it's the land of the midnight sun type of experience, as well as, during the times where there's literally like 4 hours of daylight or,
I'm gonna
something.
volunteer you for the dark one and the cold.
I know, right? Like I would say that although, it's all over the place. Like, I mean, it's not just, we forget about how the latitude effects of where we're at too. So, and circling back to this, thinking about, creating your own kind of artificial sunset is, especially when again we're gonna kind of hone in on that concept of local time. You might need to close your curtains. You might need to dim the lamps. You might need to take a warm shower. You might need to change into comfortable clothing. You might need to begin a quiet activity such as reading or stretching or doodling in the sleep takeout, coloring book that's about to come out. You might need to listen to music. You might need to talk with your travel companion. Really, what all these things are doing is you're sending your brain a coordinated message that says, okay, my day is ending now, even though the sun outside has not received the memo. Because, especially to use this example of northern latitudes, during the summertime, is, your body is not naturally going to see these external cues and say, oh, it's sleepy time for me. In fact, your body's going to get really confused. So, all right, tip number 4, pack darkness in your suitcase. Michelle, what does that mean?
Yeah, just go to sleeptakeout.com, go ahead and get our headband eye mask. It doubles both as an ear warmer for the cold times and this light cover, okay? So don't assume that your cruise ship, room, your hotel room, that they have everything that you need. A lot of times they have factored this in, but don't assume that it's going to work for you. You can bring things with you. So if you know, hey, I get up a lot at night and that eye mask isn't going to help me when I get up at night if there's light coming through, maybe bring some small clips or clothespins that you can close the gaps between the curtains. You can put a towel roll underneath the door so you're not seeing like a light that's on all the time. Remember, in hallways and cruise ships and in hotel rooms, people are coming in and out all the time. They're not going to just have this dark that you would have at home. And you may also want to either like unplug or turn around bright clocks or charging stations that are going to give you that extra light.
Yeah, a cool, quiet, and dark room that really gives your sleep system much better conditions to work with. And because you might briefly wake up during the night, you want to try and keep the room dark when that happens. So avoid opening the curtains to check whether it's morning. And in a northern summer, the presence of sunlight might tell you very little about the actual time. Like, you might open up the curtains and there's broad daylight. It's like 2 a.m. in the morning. And so also, whenever possible, avoid repeatedly checking the clock. So again, that clock watching can quickly turn a normal awakening into a stressful calculation about how much sleep remains. All right. Tip number 5, use naps carefully. So this one is really saying, after that overnight flight or that major time change, a nap can feel irresistible. And, A brief nap it might help you to function safely and enjoy the day. But a long afternoon nap, that can remove too much sleep pressure and make it a lot harder to sleep at the new local bedtime. So this is where we want to try, if you're traveling, maybe we kind of keep this nap, or I like to call them nap opportunities, because you're giving yourself the opportunity to nap. And if you don't nap, that's okay. If you do, that's great. But maybe keep your nap opportunity to still that 20 to 30-minute maximum window. And ideally, do that earlier in the local daytime if you can.
Yeah, I think, our community has a lot of issues with insomnia. And one of the things is the pressure that builds when you have to sleep in a certain amount of time because you're on a vacation and you think it's supposed to look at this time and you factored this and this in. But do remember that that can backfire on you. And your body does see longer naps, things that are generally longer than an hour and a half or 2 hours. It sees that like you just had like a full fill of your sleep, even though you didn't. And so if you're taking that in the day, that is going to make it a little bit more difficult at night. But don't assume that you just messed up if you did that, because if you did it, fine, it's there. But I don't want you having that issue laying in bed or, catastrophizing about the next day that you're not going to sleep well because you didn't get a full night of sleep. Remember how great you felt after the 3-hour nap. Your body's still making up for a lot of this. If you find yourself awake and you're in bed, again, when you're traveling, you don't always have a lot of extra space. If you can find a thing that you can do quietly with a little book lamp or reading a book, or if you can do some gentle stretching, or this could be actually in many situations an opportunity to incorporate that like extra shower where you're not cleaning yourself, but you're just having the water go off of you and relaxing. What it doesn't give you permission to do, just like Dan said, is it doesn't give you permission to break all the rules that like clock watching, watching another movie, checking email, scrolling. Short naps, the 10, 15-minute ones, up to 20 minutes maybe, can use to bridge to the local time and not replace your night of sleep. All right, we're on to tip number 6. I want you to be strategic with caffeine and alcohol. So
All right.
it does feel kind of good, like you're on vacation, that you can do whatever you want and you're tired. And you know what the airports have a lot of is caffeine, and you're offered coffee and tea many places. And it can be helpful when it's used to support alertness during the local morning or afternoon. But it is a dehydrating effect. So you have to know where you are. It can sit in your body for a lot of hours. And even if it doesn't interfere per se with how tired you are, it can affect your trips to the bathroom. It can affect your anxiety level. So there's a lot of things that are going on. So I would say try and stop caffeine at least 6 hours before your planned bedtime. Early if you're sensitive to it, even up to 12 hours. And alcohol should not be the anti-caffeine. So do remember both of them being very dehydrating, and particularly if you're going to someplace outdoors and fun. I mean, just the altitude alone is going to make you feel a little bit dehydrated. So be careful.
Yeah, and when we also know too, and this was just a plug, that there was a special Starbucks blend of coffee up in Canada, which I was like, oh my God, it tastes so good. It's called this True North blend. But anywho, not that you need more caffeine or any of it's due, but to echo what you're saying, Michelle, like the alcohol is not the answer. It will definitely make a lot of things worse. We know it'll impact, sleep apnea. We know it can amplify snoring, like a whole bunch of things. So we definitely want to make sure that you're not using alcohol to help your body, calm down into that. So, which then brings us, to tip number 7, which is really that your sleep is regulated not only by your circadian clock, but also by your sleep pressure. And we know that sleep pressure builds during the time that you're awake. The longer you remain awake and active, the stronger that sleep pressure generally becomes. So after you arrive, use gentle physical activity to help build your sleep pressure. Maybe take a walk outside, explore the destination, remain engaged during the local day. Try not to spend the entire day lying in the hotel bed attempting to recover, because that can really leave you caught between sleeping and waking without receiving really a satisfying amount of either of those things.
That's a great point. And I would say is this starts even before your trip. A lot of people will kind of have a down day right before their travel day, just in case, make sure that they're not doing anything overexerting themselves. But then they're now in this stuck standpoint and they don't have enough sleep pressure. So they like nap on and off, and it really does affect things. So at night, try to go to bed when you're genuinely sleepy and not just because the clock has reached a particular time. If you haven't gotten there, do something to get there.
Yep. So again, the same, and Michelle, that's my mind was thinking as we're talking about this. We should create a sleep takeout coloring book, Northern Latitudes edition, for our listeners that are traveling from one destination to the other. So you can pick up the relevant sleep takeout coloring book version. But if you're laying awake for a prolonged period and becoming frustrated, we want you to get out of bed and do something quiet and dim light. These are where those tired but not sleepy, activities that we've talked about on multiple episodes, but we're definitely going to kind of reinforce in the sleep takeout coloring workbook. You want to make sure that you do all those things and then return to your bed and your bedroom when sleepiness becomes stronger. So you do not want the travel bed to become associated with struggling and calculating and trying to force your sleep. Tip number 8, be thoughtful about melatonin. Michelle, take it away on this.
So we mentioned melatonin before, and it can be helpful for jet lag. So melatonin is not a conventional sleep medicine. It's helpful like you're using it as a time cue. So melatonin can be very helpful when you're traveling east and you're ready to still stay up because your body says you haven't built up that pressure, but the light is there and it's getting dark, and it can help take your physical body to understand exactly how dark it is. It's better understood as this signal rather than a conventional sleeping pill. So melatonin really doesn't have any purpose for the middle of the night. It just is to tell your body what time cue it's on. Taking it at the wrong time can be ineffective, and it can potentially shift your internal clock. So sometimes it actually keeps people awake when taken in the middle of the night. So more is not necessarily better. It's been studied for safety for quite a while. So while it's not going to make you stop breathing or make your sleep apnea worse, it's definitely not going to improve your sleep if it's something that you're dosing different times of the day.
Yeah. And Michelle, I know we've talked about this on one of the episodes where we took a deep dive in melatonin. It is not a benign, substance. It's a hormone. And, especially if you're taking other medications or maybe pregnant or have a medical condition or, other situations, we always want you to talk with your healthcare provider, the person that you get medical care from. That is who you need to talk to about your melatonin habits. We also want you to avoid experimenting with a large dose of these things for the first time or doing it in the middle of a trip. Again, talk with your healthcare provider from that perspective. All right. Tip number 9, do not catastrophize about one imperfect night. And this is really that psychological trip that most travelers need the most. You may not sleep perfectly on the first night when you arrive at your destination. And I know every one of us are like, we've been looking forward to this trip for so long and we just want it to go amazing. And then you arrive there and you're like, but I feel so bad because of this jet lag. That's okay. Even if the first night doesn't go as well as you thought, or even the first few nights, that does not mean the vacation is ruined. It does not mean that you've permanently damaged your sleep. And it also, most importantly, does not mean that you must spend the next day urgently trying to compensate. Your body is adaptable. So that flexibility, we always want to reinforce that.
You want to continue getting up at a local time that's reasonable. Even if you haven't slept well, you want to seek that bright light during the day. You want to stay active. If you need a nap, you want to keep it short. You want to set a timer. You want to drink a whole glass of water before going to your nap. So do all the things that will make it so that you are getting up, and use the eye mask, okay? Don't just kind of close your eyes and keep opening them up and getting that bright light. So you want to give your sleep system another opportunity the next night. We recorded an episode recently that your best night of sleep starts at 8 a.m. that morning. You want to make sure that you keep getting up and moving around and not worrying about the rest of your trip, or assuming that all of the things that are going to happen are going to be bad because of your sleep.
Yeah, the goal is not to command your body to sleep perfectly on demand. The goal is really to give your body clear and consistent signals and then allow it time to adjust. A simple northern travel kind of sleep plan is helpful. Michelle, take it away on this one.
So everything in one practical plan, you want to get local to whatever the time zone is when you get there. Get outside, move your body if it's in the day. If it's at night, don't do that, even if it's bright light, even if you want to start exploring. You want to transition to meal times where you are. Hydrate and use only caffeine and alcohol in very small amounts when it's going to support your body. And if you need to take a nap, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah. And as bedtime approaches, remember, create your own sunset. Close those blackout curtains, dim the room, reduce screen brightness, and shift into quieter activities. Use an eye mask. Keep the bedroom cool, dark, and quiet. Go to bed when you're sleepy. And if you become wide awake and frustrated, we want you to get out of bed and briefly return to bed only when that sleepiness comes back. And I would say, again, most importantly, the goal here is progress, not perfection. So expect adjustment rather than getting it right.
Light is good. You are going on different trips. You are going on enjoying something that you planned for a long time. Enjoy the scenery. Make sure that your adventures are really good, but you want to still protect the darkness and give yourself some sleep time. This is not the time to pull all-nighters.
Yes, 100%. And that is today's kind of sleep takeout. Use the light to define the day, create darkness to define the night, and give your internal clock a little patience while it catches up with your itinerary.
Thanks for listening. Go to sleeptakeout.com, see previous episodes that you may have missed, and see if you want to pick up any of our swag that we have that might make you adjust to light better if you're traveling this summer.
Yes. And just for an update for all our listeners, our sleep takeout coloring workbook is in progress. We are getting it closer. It is definitely also taking a little bit more energy than we anticipated. However, I think you guys are going to be so excited when this thing drops. It's we are super excited. So until next time, remember that better sleep is usually not about trying harder. It's about creating the conditions that allow your sleep to happen. All right, Sleep Takeout Nation. Looking forward to seeing you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Welcome back, Sleep Takeout Nation, to the podcast where we talk about complicated science. Oh, shit. Hold on. I got to stop. I haven't done this in a while.